Good morning, this is Roger Thunder, the Desert Shaman. Before I get started here on this video, I would like to thank several people, and those would be Donna and Tracy, for their generous donations, both of these being women or the goddess energy, and so that in itself is telling. So thank you for the support of this channel and your generous donations. Now we'll get on with the topic of state-sponsored terrorism or government terrorism. First, let's look at the word terrorist or terror. What does that indicate? Well, it indicates fear. When you're in a state of anxiety or terror or fear caused by a certain action, then that is terrorism. So I'll just unequivocally say, without a doubt, that the government of the United States of America, we'll just focus on the United States right now, but there's a lot of the other countries in Europe that are associated or connected with and do their own form of terrorist activity. So terrorism, described in the dictionary, is an act of violence by certain parties for an agenda, or an act of violence to cause fear, to bring a population or a government or a nation under control by the use of fear. So if we look at the United States of America, we will start first with the current situation in Ukraine. And the thing that sparked me to do this video was that latest explosion of the Kharkov, I think it is, dam in Ukraine. And of course, before that, we have the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline. There is no doubt in my mind whatsoever, and in many people's minds, that when you see an incident like this, let's say the blowing up of a pipeline of a sovereign nation supplying fuel and energy to other sovereign nations, when you see an act like this, that is an act of terrorism. That is an act of, because it's not war, it's not really war, it has nothing to do with war. Nor did this latest explosion in Ukraine, blowing up this massive dam and causing thousands of people agony and anxiety and killing a lot of people and just destroying all kinds of land and flooding out cities. And when you do an act like that, it's a major act of terrorism. It has nothing to do with war. So in this current conflict in Ukraine, we have Ukraine being backed by, the CIA and the American institution, or the people that are the West, let's put it that way, which is dominated by the hegemony of the USA, and anything that happens in Ukraine where it's unexplainable and it just comes out of a clear blue sky and can't really be, by all reasonable factoring, can't be blamed on Russia, because why would they blow up their own dam? Why would they blow up a dam that's going to affect their frontline activities in this current war? So it was either done by, Ukraine with the permission of the West, because Ukraine doesn't do anything without the permission of the West. They're puppets of the West or USA. So when you see something of this magnitude, and this is like a global catastrophe almost. I mean, it's a catastrophe that's kind of off the charts. You don't usually in war there's an unspoken rule that you don't do things like destroy critical infrastructure. Let's say like Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, which is upstream from this dam, which this is kind of a two for one. You know, this is killing two birds with one stone for the terrorists of America and the terrorists of the West, because they can cause much consternation. With one single blow to a dam, you got the power plant, the nuclear power plant upstream, which needs that water for cooling. So we're getting into a very dicey situation here where you could have a nuclear meltdown of one of the containers there. You could have a nuclear meltdown of one of the containers, or one of the producers of nuclear energy. Don't know the exact term here I'm looking for, but you know what I mean. Now, before that, we had the Nord Stream pipeline, which destroyed all the critical infrastructure of Europe by blowing up much needed energy. And a lot of people might say, well, you don't know. Well, I know, okay. I trust Seymour Hersh, who is a world-renowned journalist who reported on the fact that it was the Biden administration and the CIA that orchestrated this thing. And it is the Biden administration and the CIA and probably the FBI too, excuse me, the FBI too, in collusion with other operatives, that did this, okay? And so what they try to do is this is called a false flag. Let's do a horrendous act of violence and let's blame it on our enemy, okay? Let's do a horrendous act of violence and blame it on our enemy. Now, this is something that the USA has done continually for years, for decades, okay? They did it in the Vietnam War with at the Gulf of Tonkin, and they did it, they've done it many times. 9/11 was another terrorist act committed by our government, the USA. Make no mistake about it. I don't care what anybody says. You got groups like Pilots for 9/11 Truth and Architects for 9/11 Truth. They know. They got the evidence, and they got all their ducks lined up in a row here. So basically, that was a start of activity that was terrorist activity by our own government. Now, when you kill your own citizens like they did at 9/11, and when you kill your own citizens, when you declare war on your own citizens through acts of violence, that is terrorism, okay? And it's really funny because it's not so funny, but it's really notable, let's say, that when they blew up the World Trade Centers with their planned operation, supposedly that was a indication, or let's say a starting point for them to declare a war against terrorism. Okay, so what they did here is they fooled everybody. They committed an act of terror so that they could trump up a phony war against other Middle Eastern nations on the context of them being terrorists. Okay, and from that point on, there became a war on terror caused by a terrorist act by the United States government. Who does these things? Who does these terrorist acts? Well, usually it's the three-letter agencies, the CIA, the FBI, mostly orchestrates these kind of things and has for decades. In many countries, they have committed terrorist acts and assassinations, okay? And they committed assassinations like the assassination of JFK, for example, is a perfect example of them committing a terrorist act for an agenda. And what's that an agenda? It's to silence those who speak truth. JFK spoke truth, spoke outright against the CIA, said he was going to tear them into 1,000 pieces and scatter them to the wind. He knew, okay, he knew what was happening. So they killed him, basically. And no, Lee Harvey Oswald didn't kill Kennedy. So you got all kinds of terrorist acts going on continually. Like let's take another one. Let's say the drone war. When the drones came out, I hated fucking drones because I'm a pilot, number one, and anything that flies that you aren't in and flying yourself, but flying remotely, to me is despicable. Especially when you're using it to target, okay, supposed quote unquote terrorists in other countries, blowing up wedding parties, blowing up selected groups of people in Middle Eastern countries that somebody labeled a terrorist, okay? So you got the drone war, okay? You got that as a terrorist act. Now let's look at what's going on right in the United States. You have many, let me emphasize that, I think I did, acts of terrorism in the form of staged mass shootings, okay? You got the staged mass shootings that happen all the time, okay, where a person is basically set up by the FBI or targeted by the FBI to be a patsy, just like, Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy. So you got people that they target, and usually these people are on some kind of medication for depression or whatever. They have problems. They have mental problems. So they suck these people in and set them up to do certain things, or what they will do is they will blame it on one of these people that they have performed their MK Ultra on, or and usually every time there's a shooting, not every time, but a lot of times that there's shootings or mass shootings, you see that these people that commit them were somehow connected or had a connection or were watched by or had come into contact with the FBI at some point, or the FBI had them under suspicion, but yet never did anything to stop it, okay? And you got things like the marathon bombing, okay? That's another false flag. They continually use false flags over and over and over again, creating horrific acts of terrorism on the populace and then trying to blame it on something like guns or to further their agenda on gun control. Okay. Then you got other forms of terrorism by the United States or by those who are in collusion with, let's say, the CIA or the deep state or whatever. You got other acts of terrorism in different forms, like the fact that certain high rollers like George Soros, who incidentally he's a Jew, by the way, and he turned his own people over to the Nazis. So that tells you about his morals. He has funded many organizations, okay, behind the scenes that are supposedly good, upright organizations that are for the, for certain people's rights. Okay, so you have Black Lives Matter, which is funded by George Soros, who have committed all kinds of acts of terrorism across the nation in their protests in years past, recent years past, all over. You've seen it on TV. You've seen them attacking people in the streets and attacking businesses and burning businesses. And so that is another act of terrorism sponsored by and condoned by the United States of America. Are you starting to get the picture here? I could go on and list hundreds and hundreds of incidents, okay? Even the thing that they're calling a terrorist act, this thing at the Trump debacle and the Patriot movement and the overtaking of the White House, and oh yeah, those people are domestic terrorists, they're saying. But yet, come to find out, FBI agents were planted amongst the group there, and all kinds of suspicious activity is coming to light about how the FBI, again, the three-letter agencies, I would say the three-letter agencies are probably the biggest threat to humanity. The three-letter agencies and the military-industrial complex, okay? Oh, and you can throw in the pharmaceutical industry in that too. There is another group of terrorists, and it's funny, they want to call everybody else. Let's say somebody tries to speak truth or tries to have a demonstration against certain things, like let's say the lockdowns and the pandemic and that whole bullshit. Well, they want to label them as terrorists, when in fact that whole operation was a terrorist act by the United States of America again. Using fear, okay, restricting people's rights. And see, they always do this in the name of, well, it's good for the people. What's good for the majority of the people, or it's good that we do this because it protects people. When in actuality, whatever they're doing, whether it's a false medical emergency or a false emergency with like 9/11, or a false emergency here, and now another thing comes to mind. We have the Oklahoma City bombing. Another terrorist act by our government. Timothy McVeigh was another patsy, okay? who ended up taking a fall when it is proven that, and has come to light through many, many avenues of research, that the Oklahoma City bombing, that building could have never been blown up to that magnitude, a whole half of a building, by just one truck full of fertilizer. Come on, people. The more you dig in, the more you look at things. Okay, let's take another three-letter agency. We might as well get them all in here. Let's take the ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Agency, who is another form of terrorist trying to curb law-abiding citizens from having any kind of firearm in defense, in self-defense, in defense of their freedom. So we're constantly bombarded by acts of terrorism, whether they be overt or covert. Now, some of the covert ways that they can terrify people or strike fear into people is the media, okay? The mass media. The mass media constantly beats a drum about this country's bad, Russia's bad, the Patriot movement is bad, Trump is bad, this is bad, that's bad. When basically all of this stuff that they're saying is bad has been orchestrated at some point, okay? It's a continual deception of the American people. The American people have no idea, because they don't look into things, they don't go to alternative viewpoints, they don't research, they don't have critical thinking, they don't think lucidly. They're too involved with the mundane bullshit of everyday life and the mundane bullshit that is continually projected upon them by this mainstream media, who uses, again, a kind of a overt or covert form of terrorism by continually striking fear. If it leads, it bleeds, or if it bleeds, it leads. In other words, let's just keep stoking the fire of anxiety and fear. And so then we have another, this leads me, like I say, I could go on forever. This leads me to the central bank, okay? And this leads me to the financial situation in the United States, which is off the charts. I mean, how do you get 30 trillion? Even if can you wrap your mind around just 1 trillion? Can you even wrap your mind around that? I mean, that's a lot of fucking money, okay? But we have like a 30 trillion debt run up by the United States, not run up by the American people, but run up, these figures are something that indicates that the United States has been totally irresponsible as far as taking care of their finances goes, okay? And who has to pay for this $30 trillion debt? Well, the American taxpayer, of course, and that can never be paid back. So basically you're in constant subjugation by paying taxes, which is another thing that's illegal, okay? There is no legality with the tax situation, okay? There is no need for an internal revenue service. There is really no need for a CIA. There really is no need for an FBI. These organizations were all formed, like the CIA was once the OSS and was formed during World War II for activities that supposedly had to do with double agents and spying and stuff like that. But then it branched off after that into this huge, monstrous organization that became a spy organization for not only other countries, but the American people too. Now, also, let's throw into the mix that, when Obama came into office, he made a law, okay, that said it was okay, to use propaganda, okay, lies, disinformation on the American citizens by our own government. Okay, that was made legal. I believe that was an executive order signed into law by Obama. These things just keep compiling, keep stacking up, and getting to this point where it's pure insanity. The original formation of, let's say, the Constitution and the Founding Fathers and all that stuff has been thrown right out the window, and any safeguards against, like, tyranny, like with the Bill of Rights and the Constitution and the Second Amendment and the Fourth Amendment. All this stuff has been eroded by the institution of things like, let's say, the Office of Homeland Security. Okay, that also came into effect after 9/11. That was a reason for 9/11 to happen. What about the Patriot Act? The Patriot Act is something that started adulterating or eroding or causing our rights to be taken away. So I think you get my drift here. I think you'll get the drift that America is the biggest terrorist organization that ever walked the face of the earth. So how do you fight terrorism when they do a double speak on you, okay, and they accuse you of being the terrorist when actually they're the terrorist? And the reason I'm doing this video is that, I'm just getting sick of this shit. Really getting sick of it. And people are so fucking stupid, okay, that they can't put the dots together. They can't put two and two together. They can't realize that this government that they claim is, free, and the American freedom and the whole ball of wax there. It's best to live in America, and America is land of the free and home of the brave, and it's total bullshit, and has been since day one. Okay, even when the European man came over here and took over the indigenous nations and the Native American people, that's when it all started. Okay, that was an act of terrorism. That wasn't an act of war. They fucking terrorized 200 million Native Americans and did all kinds of horrible things to them, eventually putting them in concentration camps called reservations. So anybody that thinks for 1 minute, okay, and I'm just scratching the surface here. I mean, there's many other things that I could mention, but I'm just talking off the top of my head here. So I'm not going to make this video 2 hours long by explaining all the guilt and all the fear and all the anxiety that this ridiculous criminal organization called America has laid on the people's heads, has perpetrated in the name of democracy and freedom, There is no such thing as democracy and freedom. That whole word democracy has become a dirty word because it really doesn't mean what people think it means, okay? So these are things that you need to think about. These are things that need to be made evident to you and a lot of other people here. But just think, what triggered this video was the fact that this latest explosion of this dam in Ukraine, another act that I am positively sure in my heart was committed with the consent of the United States, or directed by the United States to the CIA, or the subversive elements that are trying to take down this sovereign country called Russia, okay? It's getting out of hand here. And now what is next? I mean, what is next here? Because first of all, you had the pipeline, and then you got the dam, and then you got the continued action of supporting Nazis and terrorist elements in Ukraine. But when they can't win that, which they won't, and they're not going to win, what's going to happen then? Well, I mean, even if Russia does take Ukraine and changes out some of maybe the leaders there, or takes them out or whatever, it doesn't really matter, because the United States is never going to give up trying to hurt Russia, trying to cause a war, trying to split Russia up into all kinds of different little territories, trying to invade and take Russia's resources. So when they say this war could go on for decades, not maybe the actual war and the fighting in Ukraine, but this war is on a much higher level. It's on a much higher level. It's on a geopolitical level here. It's on a balance of power level that is never going to stop until you cut the head off of the snake, or cut the head off of the beast known as America, or you bring it to its knees through some kind of financial action, okay, or financial warfare. So anyway, I hope you get the drift of what I'm saying here. I hope you wake up and realize that this great, great, great country we live in here has no resemblance to anything that you might call truthful, nonviolent. Let me not leave out the military-industrial complex either, which is closely connected with the central banks, closely connected with Congress, has bought off Congress completely, closely connected with the government, is the government in a sense, making money and more money off a war and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people just in Ukraine. I won't mention the millions and millions of people that they have killed throughout the decades and the history with their foreign wars and their foreign entanglements. So, like I say, I could go on and on and on, but at some point I gotta stop here. But just to give you a drift, just to give you, just to wake you up and let you know that unless something is done, let's say from another government, bringing down America to its knees, and America is falling, Make no mistake about it. It's in its death throes right now with finances and their lack of, they're finding out that they really can't control people through acts of terrorism and war. They can for a short period of time, but at some point it's all that, the chickens are going to come home to roost, and this is all going to be blowback right in their fucking faces, okay? And if it's not from another country, at some point, people here will wake up and either take up arms, as they should have a long time ago, and have a revolution like the founding fathers said was necessary. That's the state of the situation right now, okay? So I'm just going to leave it there. I'm not going to expound on any kind of spiritual answers or anything like that, because I've covered that in depth in past videos. This is just kind of a reaffirmation or a retelling of a story about how fucked up America and governments in general are. Now, I've just covered America in this video, but the UK is the same thing. It's a clone. They're a clone of each other. And so this is what's happening, people. And so I'm going to leave it there today with those thoughts, and let that marinate for a while.